The millionaire was in shock when he saw what the nanny did to his son. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's begin. Roderick Matthews was the epitome of American success. An influential entrepreneur in New York City, owner of a chain of private clinics, and one of the most respected names in the private healthcare sector, Roderick had built an empire with discipline, focus, and tireless work. His journey, which began in a humble family from a town in upstate New York, was recounted in motivational lectures and features in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. He was admired by many, feared by some competitors, and seen as an example of ascension in the competitive supplementary health market. His office on Fifth Avenue was a monument to his success. From the 28th floor, he commanded a network that already spanned 6 American states, with plans for expansion into the American South next year. His agenda was filled with consecutive meetings, constant travel and negotiations that moved millions. The walls displayed diplomas, certifications, and photos with authorities. What those walls didn't show was the growing emptiness in the life of the man behind the empire. In his mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, while Roderick dealt with spreadsheets and phone calls, there was a boy who barely knew his own father. Arthur, his 4-year-old son, was born with a delicate motor condition, a result of complications during childbirth. Since then, his life had been a sequence of appointments, therapies, and adaptations. The boy had vibrant potential and intelligence, but his body didn't respond as it should. Specialists were cautious in their prognoses. They spoke of gradual development, small victories, and adaptation. Words that sounded like excuses in Roderick's ears. Laura, his wife, dedicated herself entirely to their son. A talented architect, she had abandoned a promising career to become Arthur's primary caregiver. While Roderick built clinics across the country, she built a domestic system to meet her son's needs. She hired physical therapists, researched adapted equipment, monitored the boy's motor and cognitive development. The routine was exhausting and often solitary. Interaction between father and son had been reduced to brief moments at breakfast, when Arthur was still sleepy, and quick nocturnal appearances in the boy's room, who was usually already asleep. Roderick justified his absence with the same argument he repeated to himself. He worked to ensure his son had access to the best available treatments. "I just hired Dr. Helen Rogers for our pediatric neurology team," Roderick commented one morning as he hastily drank his coffee. "She's an international authority on early stimulation. She'll see Arthur on Monday." Laura stared at him with a look that mixed tiredness and frustration. "It would be good if you could attend the appointment, at least this time," she replied without much hope. "Laura, you know Monday is presentation day for the Texas investors. We're talking about the biggest expansion in the company's history." The conversation was interrupted by the entrance of Mrs. Cecilia, the housekeeper who had worked with the family for almost a decade. Beside her stood a young woman of about 20, with curly hair tied in a simple bun, discreet clothes, and a shy smile. "Excuse me, Mrs. Laura, this is Marina, the new nanny the agency recommended. She's here for the interview." Laura looked at the young woman carefully. They had gone through 5 nannies in the last 8 months. None had stayed long. Some lacked patience with Arthur's limitations, others couldn't handle the intense care routine, and one simply disappeared after a week, leaving only an apology note. "Good morning, Marina. Let's talk in the living room, please," Laura said, rising. She turned to her husband. "Roderick, you'll be late for your 8 o'clock meeting." He checked his watch, stood up quickly, and left without saying goodbye, frantically typing on his cell phone. In the living room, Laura observed Marina closely as the young woman spoke about her previous experiences. There was something different about her. It wasn't just her technical nursing background that caught the eye, but the way she spoke about children with special needs, with knowledge, respect, and without the tone of pity that so irritated Laura. "I cared for the Carter's son, John Peter, who has cerebral palsy, for 2 years. Before that, I worked as an assistant in an inclusive school in a suburban town in New Jersey," Marina explained confidently. "I have first aid courses, training in tube feeding, and body positioning." "What made you choose to work with children who have limitations?" Laura asked directly. Marina hesitated for a moment. Her gaze became distant, as if searching for something in the past. "I believe every child has potential, ma'am. Sometimes we just need to find the right paths to develop that potential. The answer was generic, but there was sincerity in her voice. Laura decided to give the young woman a chance. She explained Arthur's routine in detail, his motor limitations, medication schedules, and specialist sessions. Marina listened attentively, taking notes and asking pertinent questions. "Would you like to meet Arthur?" Laura proposed at the end of the conversation. Marina smiled for the first time more openly. Of course, that would be great. Arthur was in the adapted playroom, trying to stack colorful blocks. His movements were slow and imprecise, but the boy showed determination. Upon seeing his mother, he smiled. "Mummy, look at the castle." The unstable stack of 3 blocks seemed far from a castle, but it was an achievement for the boy. "It's beautiful, my love," Laura approached and kissed her son's forehead. "I want to introduce you to Marina. She's going to play with you and help you with your tasks." Marina crouched down, getting to the boy's eye level. "Hi, Arthur. What a cool castle you're making. Can I help?" The boy observed the stranger with curious eyes, then nodded shyly. Marina sat on the rubber mat and naturally began to talk to him about colors and shapes while participating in the game. She didn't try to do everything for him, as many did. She only offered support when necessary, encouraging Arthur to try on his own. Laura watched the interaction for a few minutes. There was something in the way Marina communicated with Arthur that impressed her. She spoke to the boy as she would to any child, without excessive infantilization or that artificial tone many adults use with children with disabilities. And, more importantly, Arthur seemed to respond well to the approach. "Marina, can you start tomorrow at 7 a.m.? Laura asked. The young woman smiled again. "Certainly, Mrs. Laura, I'll be here." In the following weeks, Marina's presence brought a new dynamic to the house. Arthur seemed happier, more willing to try new things. The nanny rigorously followed medical guidelines and Laura's instructions, but also brought subtle suggestions. A different way to position the boy during play, an alternative way to hold a pencil, small adaptations in daily activities. Laura noticed the changes, but was too busy with new demands. A problem with the foundation of the beach house in the Hamptons, her mother's 60th birthday celebration, a necessary renovation in the pediatric ward of Roderick's main clinic, a project she had agreed to coordinate to stay connected in some way to her profession. Roderick, for his part, barely noticed the new employee. In his rare appearances at home, he focused on pending emails or urgent calls. When he interacted with his son, these were brief and perfunctory moments, expensive gifts arriving from trips, quick hugs before evening meetings, promises of outings that rarely materialized. What none of them knew was that, as the family's routine continued, something silent and transformative was happening behind the scenes in that house. Marina always arrived half an hour early. In this extra time, she organized materials she brought in her backpack: small textured balls, colorful elastic bands, boxes with cutouts of different shapes. After Roderick left and when Laura was busy with her tasks, she proposed special games for Arthur. "Today we're going to be jungle explorers," she would say, spreading a circuit of cushions and pillows across the living room. "We need to cross the river full of alligators." And what seemed like a simple game was, in fact, an exercise in balance and coordination, carefully designed to stimulate specific muscles. On another day, the treasure hunt in the garden required Arthur to hold objects of different weights and sizes. The art workshop with homemade Play-Doh strengthened hand muscles and improved movement precision. Everything was recorded in a notebook Marina kept hidden in her bag. Detailed notes on the boy's progress, the exercises that worked best, persistent difficulties. It wasn't just a professional diary, it was a personal project she conducted with silent determination. On a particularly warm February afternoon, Mrs. Cecilia observed Marina and Arthur in the garden. The boy was standing, supported only by Marina's hands, trying to take small steps on the grass. His little legs trembled with effort, but his face showed concentration, not suffering. Marina guided him with words of encouragement, adjusting his posture with precise touches. "What are you doing?" the housekeeper asked, approaching with a tray of juices. Marina hesitated for an instant. "We're playing animal imitation. Mrs. Cecilia. Now it's the giraffe's turn, which walks very tall." The housekeeper frowned, suspicious. This didn't look like a simple game. It reminded her a lot of the exercises the physical therapist did with the boy on Mondays and Wednesdays. Did Dr. Peter authorize this type of activity? Does Mrs. Laura know about this? Marina smiled, trying to hide her nervousness. They're just adapted games, Mrs. Cecilia. Arthur has fun and gets stronger. Right, Arthur? The boy smiled and nodded excitedly. I'm the tallest giraffe in the zoo. The housekeeper placed the tray on the garden table, still observing the scene with suspicion. She said nothing more, but her gaze made it clear. She was attentive. That night, while tidying the couple's bedroom, Mrs. Cecilia considered mentioning the incident to Laura. She decided against it. Her employer seemed exhausted after an entire afternoon on the phone with suppliers for the clinic renovation. Besides, the boy seemed happy he hadn't hurt himself. Perhaps she was imagining problems where none existed. What no one in the house suspected was that Marina held a secret. Her professional choice was not random, nor was her skill with Arthur merely the result of technical courses. There was something deeper, a personal story that moved her and that she kept carefully hidden. In the small apartment she shared with a colleague in a suburban town in New Jersey, Marina kept in a shoebox under her bed a set of old photographs and medical reports yellowed by time. In one of the photos, a girl of approximately 8 years old hugged a baby in an adapted chair. The girl's smile contrasted with the serious expression of the baby, who wore a small leg brace. Those images were more than memories. They were the source of the silent mission Marina had undertaken in the Matthews home. Meanwhile, Roderick was facing the most intense phase of his career. The expansion into the American South demanded more travel, more meetings, more hours poring over spreadsheets and contracts. Competition with large foreign hospital groups entering the United States increased the pressure. Amidst all this came the proposal from Andrew Miller, an aggressive investor who offered an exorbitant sum to acquire 30% of the group's shares. Think carefully. Roderick, Andrew insisted during a dinner at Per Se. With this capital, you could triple the speed of expansion. We're talking about dominating the market in 3 years, not 10. Roderick hesitated. The proposal was tempting from a financial point of view, but it would mean giving up some of the control he so carefully exercised over every detail of his empire. I need to consult my team. Analyze the numbers more carefully, he replied, buying time. Don't delay. I have other interested parties, Andrew warned with a calculated smile. Oh, and bring your wife to the next dinner. I want to meet the architect who designs the most functional clinics in the country. The mention of Laura caused Roderick discomfort. How long had it been since they talked about anything other than practical matters related to Arthur or the house? When was the last time they went out together, just the two of them? The distance between them had grown silently, like an invasive plant that develops unnoticed until it dominates the entire garden. That night, Roderick arrived home later than usual. The mansion was silent, with only a few lights on. In the hallway leading to the master suite, he passed Arthur's room and noticed the door ajar. On impulse, he went in to see his son. The boy was sleeping soundly, clutching a stuffed dinosaur Roderick didn't recognize. Beside the bed, on the nightstand, was a colorful drawing. Irregular lines forming 3 figures of different sizes, probably representing the family. Roderick observed his sleeping son for a few moments. He noticed how his hair had grown, how his face seemed less round than before. Small changes that happened daily, but which he only noticed now condensed. How much longer could he justify his absence? How many moments like this was he losing irretrievably? As he left the room, he found Laura in the hallway. She was wearing reading glasses and holding a folder with projects. "I thought you'd be home later," she commented with no apparent emotion. "The meeting ended early. How's Arthur?" "Good. The physical therapist said he's responding better to the balance exercises." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words, silent accusations, accumulated resentments. "I have a proposal to discuss with you," Roderick finally said. "Andrew Miller wants to meet us for dinner. He's interested in investing in the group." Laura took off her glasses, tired. "Roderick, tomorrow is Arthur's birthday. You remember, don't you?" The question hit him like a punch. Of course he remembered. He had even bought a gift, an adapted tricycle that had cost a small fortune, and was stored at the office waiting to be delivered. But he had completely forgotten that the date was the next day. "Yes, of course, I remember. I've already arranged everything," he replied defensively. The party starts at 4. Please try to be on time. It's important for him. Roderick nodded, feeling the weight of his wife's expectation. He wanted to promise he would be there, that nothing in the world would stop him from seeing his son's smile blowing out the candles. But he knew he had a crucial video conference scheduled for 3 in the afternoon with potential Japanese partners. As always, he was torn between the commitments that built his empire and those that would sustain his family. What Roderick didn't imagine was that, the next day, a sequence of unexpected events would completely change the course of his life. A change that would begin with a last-minute cancellation, an early arrival home, and a scene he would never forget. The next morning, the Matthews house buzzed with preparations for the birthday party. Mrs. Cecilia coordinated a small team of staff, hired especially for the event, while Laura checked the final details of the dinosaur-themed decorations, Arthur's current passion. Marina had arrived even earlier than usual and was helping the boy get dressed for the big day. Patiently, she adapted each movement so Arthur could actively participate in the process. Choosing between 2 outfit options, pulling the shirt over his head, trying to button at least one button of his favorite T-Rex print shirt. "Do you think Daddy will like my outfit?" Arthur asked as Marina combed his hair. The young woman felt a pang in her chest. She knew the house's routine well, and knew that Roderick's chances of attending the event were uncertain, despite his promises. "I'm sure he will, Arthur. You look very smart. He promised to come home early today," the boy continued with hope in his voice. "He said he's going to take me to see real dinosaurs one day." Marina smiled, hiding the sadness she felt at seeing the boy's innocence. "That would be amazing. But today is all about you, with or without real dinosaurs. Everyone is coming to celebrate you." In his Fifth Avenue office, Roderick finalized preparations for the video conference with the Japanese investors. He had spent the entire morning reviewing data, adjusting presentations, and instructing his team on crucial negotiation points. The clock marked 11:23 a.m. when his secretary entered the room with a worried expression. "Dr. Matthews, I just received an email from Mr. Tanaka's secretary. They needed to reschedule the video conference for next week. It seems there was a technical problem with their servers in Tokyo." Roderick frowned, annoyed. He had reorganized his entire schedule to accommodate that meeting. "Have they confirmed a new date?" "Yes, next Tuesday, same time," the secretary replied, handing him a printed copy of the email. Roderick leaned back in his chair, processing the information. Part of him felt irritated by the setback, but another, one that rarely managed to express itself, saw an opportunity. For the first time in months, he had a free afternoon. He could get home before the party started, see the joy on his son's face when he discovered his father would be present from the beginning of the celebrations. "Mark just arrived for the 11:30 meeting," the secretary reminded him. "Keep that one. Then reorganize the rest of my schedule. I'm leaving early today." The secretary's eyes widened in surprise. In almost 5 years of working with Roderick, she had never seen him leave early voluntarily. At 2:15 p.m., Roderick drove his Mercedes along the highway, feeling a strange mix of relief and anxiety. He had bought flowers for Laura, something he hadn't done in so long he couldn't remember the last time. Arthur's adapted tricycle was in the back seat, wrapped in colorful dinosaur print paper. As he drove, his thoughts drifted between pending meetings, Andrew Miller's proposal, and Laura's expression the night before. When did they become almost strangers, communicating through practical messages and superficial conversations? At what point did he decide that building an empire was more important than building memories with his son? Upon entering the upscale gated community, he greeted the security guard with a genuine smile, another gesture that had become rare. He parked at the mansion's entrance, picked up the gifts, and walked to the front door. He used his key instead of ringing the doorbell, wanting to make a surprise. The house was silent, which surprised him. He expected to find a flurry of party preparations. He left the gifts on the hall table and walked down the corridor leading to the leisure area, where he imagined they would be organizing the decorations. It was then he heard it. Laughter coming from the backyard, Arthur's crystalline laugh, which he heard so infrequently, and the soft voice of a young woman he vaguely recognized as the nanny. Driven by curiosity, Roderick followed the sound to the patio door that led to the garden. He stopped there, partially hidden by the curtain, and what he saw left him completely motionless. as if his feet had grown roots into the noble wooden floor. Arthur was in the middle of the lawn, standing without his usual crutches. Marina was crouched a few feet away from him, arms extended towards the boy, smiling encouragingly. Between them there was a small distance, no more than 3 or 4 steps. "Remember how we do this. First we plant our feet firmly like a strong dinosaur. Then we look ahead to where we want to go," Marina said, her voice calm but firm. Arthur's face showed absolute concentration. His little legs trembled slightly, but he stood upright, determined. "One step at a time, no rush. You can do it, little explorer." And then, to Roderick's utter astonishment, Arthur took a step. Then another. His movements were unstable, hesitant, but they were steps. Real, independent, without support. The third step was followed by a loss of balance. But before Roderick could react and run to help his son, Marina was already there, holding him firmly. 3 steps today. That's a record, Arthur. Tomorrow we'll try 4. The boy smiled from ear to ear, with such pure and genuine joy that Roderick felt a lump form in his throat. That scene made no sense. According to the last medical report he had received, admittedly a few weeks ago, Arthur was progressing but would still need support for any movement for at least another 6 months. What was happening here? Roderick silently retreated, returning to the entrance hall. His mind raced frantically, trying to process what he had just witnessed. His son, who all specialists said had severe mobility limitations, was taking steps alone in the garden. And it didn't seem to be the first time he had done that. There was an established routine, commands Marina gave that Arthur clearly recognized. He heard voices coming from the kitchen. Laura and Mrs. Cecilia were discussing the final details of the party. Guests will start arriving at 4. The cake will be served at 5:30 before it gets dark, so we can take photos in the garden, Laura was saying. Roderick promised to arrive around 4, but you know his routine. His wife's resigned tone hit him like a silent accusation. That was the portrait his family had of him, a man who couldn't be trusted to be present even at his own son's birthday. "Roderick? Is that you?" Laura's voice sounded surprised when she entered the hall and found him standing there, still holding the flowers, with a bewildered expression. "I got home early. The video conference was cancelled," he replied mechanically, still processing the scene in the garden. Laura seemed genuinely surprised, even a little disconcerted by his early presence, as if he were a guest who arrived before the agreed time. "That's good," she said, accepting the flowers with a polite smile, far from those they used to exchange in the early years of their marriage. "Arthur will be happy to see you. He's in the garden with Marina." "I saw him," Roderick replied, studying his wife's reaction. "He was walking." Something crossed Laura's face, a shadow of apprehension, perhaps. But she quickly composed herself. "Oh yes, he's made surprising progress in recent weeks. The physical therapist says he's responding very well to the new treatment." There was something strange in the way Laura spoke, as if she was omitting important details. "I saw him taking steps alone. Laura without support." She looked away for a moment, adjusting the flowers in her arms. "Sometimes he can balance for a few seconds. They're small but significant advances." Roderick wanted to insist, to ask more, to understand what was happening in his own home while he spent his days building his empire. But they were interrupted by the sound of the back door. Marina entered carrying Arthur in her arms, both laughing at some private joke. Upon seeing his father, the boy's eyes widened. "Daddy! You came home early." The astonishment in his son's voice was like an accusation. That should have been a normal occurrence, not a surprise worthy of celebration. "Yes, champ. I came to help you get ready for the party," Roderick replied, approaching to hug his son. Arthur moved from Marina's arms to his father's with enthusiasm. Roderick felt the boy's fragile body against his chest, realizing how little he knew this small being he had helped create. Marina observed the scene with a discreet smile, but her eyes revealed a certain apprehension. "You arrived just in time, sir," she said politely. "Arthur just finished his stimulation exercises and needs to rest a bit before the party." Stimulation exercises? That didn't seem like a simple therapeutic exercise. Something more was happening there, something everyone seemed to know except him. "What kind of exercises were you doing?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Marina and Laura exchanged a quick glance before the nanny replied, "Just some movements the physical therapist recommended, sir. They help strengthen his legs and improve his balance." Daddy, Marina taught me how to walk like a T-Rex. Want to see? Arthur exclaimed excitedly. Not now, dear, Laura interrupted quickly. You need to rest a bit and then get ready for your party. Your friends will be here soon. The way Laura cut off her son's demonstration made Roderick even more intrigued. Why so much effort to prevent him from seeing what the boy could do? I'll take him for his bath, Marina offered, extending her arms to take Arthur back. No need, Roderick replied, surprising everyone, including himself. I'll take my son. After all, it's not every day he has a birthday. Laura's surprised look and Marina's hesitation only increased his determination. For once, he would be the one to care for Arthur, to see firsthand what was happening with his son. Of course, sir, Marina agreed, taking a step back. The clean towels are in the bathroom cabinet, and his party clothes are already laid out on his bed. Roderick nodded and went upstairs carrying his son, who chatted animatedly about dinosaurs and the friends who would come to the party. As they walked down the corridor, he could feel the eyes of the two women following them, as if they feared he would discover some carefully guarded secret. In the bathroom, he helped Arthur undress and get into the tub, marveling at the ease with which the boy moved his legs to get into the water. Limited movements, no doubt, but much more coordinated than he remembered seeing before. You're stronger. Champ, he commented as he soaped his son's hair. Marina says I'm strong like a Tyrannosaurus Rex, Arthur replied proudly. She teaches me lots of cool things, Daddy. We play explorer, astronaut, dinosaur, and each game makes me stronger. Games that made him stronger? Roderick's intuition told him these weren't simple games. And what else does Marina teach you? She teaches me to stand by myself, to take steps without my crutches, to climb on the sofa. But it's a secret, the boy said, lowering his voice dramatically. Marina said it's a surprise for when I can do everything perfectly. A surprise. So that's why no one had mentioned Arthur's extraordinary progress. They were preparing some kind of revelation, perhaps for when he could walk completely unsupported. As he dressed his son in his party clothes, a task he found much more complex than he imagined, requiring patience and specific techniques, Roderick wondered who this nanny really was, the one who seemed to have transformed his son's life in a few months. Does Marina have a little brother like me? He suddenly asked, testing a theory that was beginning to form in his mind. Arthur frowned, thoughtful. I think so. She talked about a boy who also wore braces on his legs, but he's big now. The confirmation made the pieces begin to fall into place. Marina probably had personal experience with conditions similar to Arthur's. It wasn't just technical knowledge, but lived experience. When they went down to the party, the first guests were already arriving. Some families with children Arthur's age, classmates from the special school he attended 3 times a week, as well as his maternal grandmother and 2 uncles. The celebration proceeded lively. Roderick observed, with a mixture of admiration and guilt, how Arthur interacted with the other children, still with limitations, but with much more ease than he had ever imagined possible. And he noticed, above all, how Marina discreetly circulated through the environment, always attentive, always ready to offer support when necessary, but never interfering unnecessarily. It was a silent and efficient dance, unnoticed by those not specifically observing. During the happy birthday song, with Arthur smiling in front of the dinosaur-shaped cake, Roderick felt his cell phone vibrate in his pocket. It was Andrew Miller. He ignored the call, something he would never have done just a day ago. At that moment, the only thing that mattered was his son's smile and the mystery of the transformation that was happening right under his nose. When the last guests left, and Arthur, exhausted but happy, was put to bed, Roderick decided it was time to get answers. He found Marina in the kitchen, organizing the boy's medications for the next day. We need to talk. Marina. The young woman stopped what she was doing, visibly tense. Of course. Sir? In my office, please. Laura, who was supervising the post-party cleanup, gave her husband a questioning look, but he merely gestured that they would talk later. In the office, he offered Marina a chair and sat opposite her, studying her carefully. Up close, she seemed even younger, almost a teenager, though he knew she was around 23. I saw you and Arthur in the garden today, he began directly. What exactly are you doing with my son? Marina took a deep breath before replying. Mr. Matthews, I know I should have spoken sooner, but I feared you or Mrs. Laura wouldn't approve. They're not just games. They're adapted rehabilitation exercises I learned caring for my brother, who was born with cerebral palsy. The confirmation of his theory did not diminish the surprise. You're not a qualified physical therapist. No, sir. I only have a technical nursing course and some specializations in special care. But I grew up accompanying every session of physical therapy, hydrotherapy, and occupational therapy for my brother. I learned practically out of necessity. And why didn't you tell us what you were doing? Marina hesitated, her eyes downcast. At first, I just included small exercises in the games. When I realized Arthur was responding well, I gradually increased them. I told Mrs. Laura after a few weeks, when the results were already visible. She asked me to continue, but Marina paused as if choosing her words carefully. But what? Roderick pressed. She preferred it to be a surprise for you when Arthur could take several steps in a row without support. She said it would be a special gift for the family. Roderick felt a mixture of emotions, surprise at his son's progress, gratitude for Marina's work, but also hurt at having been deliberately kept out of such an important development. My brother was 4 years old when doctors said he would probably never walk unsupported, Marina continued, her voice gaining firmness. My mother worked all day to support us, so I was the one who accompanied the therapies. One day, a physical therapist showed me how to turn exercises into games. The brain learns best when it's having fun, he would say. I started doing that at home every day. 6 months later, my brother took his first steps alone. Marina's story was both moving and revealing. This young woman wasn't just doing her job. She was applying a deeply personal experience to help Arthur. Why did you choose to work with children like my son? He asked, genuinely curious. Marina's eyes shone with a mixture of determination and contained emotion. Because I know many families don't receive the necessary support, even with resources. Traditional treatments are important, of course, but it's the daily, constant stimulation that makes the real difference. And because, she hesitated for a moment, because every child deserves the chance to overcome their limits, to discover what they are truly capable of. There was something in the way Marina spoke that touched Roderick deeply. It wasn't just professional dedication, it was a personal mission. My brother is 19 today. He studies engineering at a prominent technological university in the state. He still has some limitations, but he leads an independent life, she added, with undeniable pride in her voice. Roderick processed everything in silence. Behind the facade of a nanny, Marina was a kind of angel who had entered his family's life and was literally helping his son take his first steps in the world. And he, absorbed in meetings and spreadsheets, had almost missed this daily miracle. I want you to continue working with Arthur, he finally said, but I want to know everything. I want to understand the process, follow the development. I want to be a part of it. Marina smiled, visibly relieved. That would be great, sir. Arthur always asks about you during the exercises. Having his father present would make all the difference. Guilt hit Roderick like an avalanche. His son was asking for him while struggling to overcome his limitations, while he discussed mergers and acquisitions miles away. Thank you, Marina, for everything you've done for my son. The young woman nodded simply. For her, apparently, she was doing nothing more than her duty, a perspective Roderick found simultaneously humble and powerful. When Marina left the office, Roderick remained seated, reflecting on everything he had discovered. The priorities he had set for his life now seemed terribly misguided. The empire he had built with such effort seemed empty compared to what he was losing at home. The office door opened again. It was Laura with an apprehensive expression. You talked to Marina, she said, not as a question but as a statement. Yes, and I discovered that our son is making incredible progress while I spend my days holed up in the office. Laura sat in the chair Marina had just vacated. I was going to tell you, Roderick. We were waiting for the right moment. The right moment, he repeated with a hint of bitterness. When would that be? When he could run to the door to greet me? When he was accepted into college? On his wedding day? That's not fair, Laura retorted, hurt. You're always too busy. You never have time for anything concerning Arthur. I wanted you to feel the same way I felt when I saw our son take his first steps alone. I wanted it to be special. The hurt in his wife's voice was palpable. Roderick realized that, while dedicating himself to building an empire, he had lost connection not only with his son, but also with the woman he had chosen to share his life with. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely. "You're right. I haven't been present. But that's going to change, Laura. It has to change." She looked at him with a mixture of hope and skepticism. "You've said that before, Roderick. After Arthur's last hospitalization, remember? You promised to slow down, to be more present. It lasted 2 weeks." The words hurt because they were true. His promises of change had become as empty as Black Friday ads promising real discounts. "This time it's different," he insisted, knowing how cliché it sounded. "Today I saw what I'm losing. I saw how much you all accomplished without me. And I realized I don't want to be just the man who pays the bills and shows up for birthdays." Laura sighed, exhausted not only by the long day but by years of frustrated hopes. "I want to believe it, Roderick. I really do." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with the weight of unmet expectations and broken promises. Finally, Roderick spoke. "Andrew Miller wants to buy 30% of the group's shares." The abrupt change of subject caught Laura by surprise. "And what are you going to do?" "A week ago I would have accepted without a second thought. It would be a chance to expand quickly, dominate the market in the American South, maybe even start international operations." "And now?" "Now I'm thinking about another proposal. Selling 51%, giving up operational control." Laura's eyes widened, genuinely shocked. Roderick Matthews, the man who had built an empire from scratch, who controlled every detail of his business with an iron fist, considering giving up control of the company that was practically his identity. "Are you serious?" "I've never been more serious in my life," he replied, surprising himself with the certainty he felt. "I would remain on the board, maintain a significant stake, but I wouldn't be managing the day-to-day anymore. I would have time for you all, to watch our son grow." Laura seemed unable to process the idea. She knew her husband well. Work wasn't just his occupation. It was his passion, his personal fulfillment, the source of his self-esteem. "Roderick, don't make hasty decisions. What happened today touched you, it's natural. But selling the company, it's not an emotional decision," he interrupted. "It's the most rational one I've ever made. What's the point of building an empire if I lose my family in the process? What's the sense of accumulating fortunes if I don't have time to see my son take his first steps? To rebuild my marriage?" The mention of their marriage made Laura look away. It was a subject they had avoided for months, the growing distance between them, the gradual transformation of a loving couple into partners in a family enterprise called the Matthews home. "We need to talk more about this," she said, getting up. "But now I'm exhausted." "It's been a long day." Roderick nodded, understanding that his wife needed time to process everything. He himself was still assimilating the internal revolution he was experiencing. When Laura left, he remained in the office looking at the framed diplomas and certificates on the walls, symbols of achievements that now seemed strangely empty. His cell phone vibrated again. It was Andrew Miller for the 3rd time. Roderick hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Andrew, sorry I didn't get back to you sooner. I was at my son's birthday." "I understand completely," Andrew replied with that falsely sympathetic tone that business sharks love to use. "Family first always. But we need to talk about the proposal. I have new investors interested. We can increase the offer by 15%. Roderick took a deep breath before replying. "I have a counter-proposal for you, Andrew." "But not over the phone. Shall we have lunch tomorrow?" Of course. "At Percy?" "No. At the restaurant of my main clinic in the Upper West Side. I want you to see the facilities, the team. You need to understand what you're investing in." The change in Roderick's tone surprised the investor. He no longer seemed like the eager-to-close-a-deal businessman he had met days before. "As you wish. Noon is good? Perfect. And Andrew, bring your lawyer. I think we'll close the deal tomorrow." After hanging up, Roderick felt a serenity he hadn't experienced in years. The decision was made. Of course, there would be details to iron out, tough negotiations ahead, perhaps even resistance from his closest team, but the course was set. He went upstairs silently and stopped at Arthur's bedroom door, ajar as it always was at night. He entered silently and approached the bed. The boy was sleeping soundly, his little face relaxed, one hand still holding the small stuffed dinosaur he had received at the party. Roderick sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son. How close had he come to losing those moments forever? How many had he already lost irretrievably? "I promise I'll be here for you, son," he whispered, lightly stroking Arthur's hair, "to see every new step, every achievement. I promise." It was a different kind of promise from the others he had made. It wasn't just a verbal commitment, one of those easily broken at the first important meeting or business trip. It was a promise sealed with a concrete decision, a change of direction in his own life. When he finally lay down next to Laura, who was already asleep, Roderick felt as if he had awakened from a long trance. The empire he had built would continue to exist, probably even grow more under Andrew and his team's command, but he would no longer be its slave. There was a life waiting for him, right there inside that house, a life he had almost let slip away while pursuing business success. The next morning, upon waking, Roderick made an unprecedented decision. He did not immediately check emails on his phone, as he had for over a decade. Instead, he spent a few minutes watching Laura, who was still asleep. Then he silently got up and went to Arthur's room. The boy was already awake, trying to sit up in bed with some difficulty. His face lit up when he saw his father. "Daddy, you're still home?" The surprise in the child's voice was almost painful to hear. For Arthur, his father's presence in the morning was as extraordinary as a visit from Santa Claus. "Yes, champ, and I'm having breakfast with you today." He helped his son get up and, instead of immediately picking up the small crutches leaning against the wall, he crouched in front of him. "Marina told me you can already take some steps by yourself. Want to show Daddy?" Arthur's eyes shone with a mixture of pride and apprehension. "I might fall," he warned, with childish seriousness. "I'll be here to catch you," Roderick replied, feeling the symbolic weight of his own words. The boy nodded, concentrating. He initially supported himself on his father's hands, then gradually let go until he stood alone, arms outstretched to the sides in search of balance, like a little tightrope walker. "Remember what Marina always says?" Arthur asked, with an expression of absolute concentration. "What does she say, son?" "One step at a time, no rush." And with a determination Roderick wished he had inherited, the boy took a step. Then another. He faltered on the third but regained his balance. On the fourth step he reached his father's outstretched arms, who hugged him tightly, feeling tears he didn't even know he was holding back. "I'm so proud of you, son." Arthur smiled with that pure joy that only children can express. "Now I can play tag with my friends." That simple phrase, spoken with so much hope, deeply affected Roderick. His son wasn't just learning to walk. He was glimpsing a new world of possibilities that had previously seemed unattainable. And he, Roderick, had almost missed the chance to witness this transformation. At that moment he heard footsteps in the corridor. It was Marina, already dressed for work, arriving to start her day. She stopped at the door, surprised to see father and son together so early. "Good morning, Mr. Matthews. Good morning, Arthur." "Marina!" "I showed Daddy I can walk by myself now," the boy exclaimed proudly. "I saw it," she replied, smiling. "And they were 4 perfect steps. We're making progress, aren't we?" The use of "we" did not go unnoticed by Roderick. It wasn't just Arthur progressing or Marina teaching. It was a partnership, a shared journey. "Marina, I want to learn the exercises you do with him," Roderick said, standing up. "I want to be able to help when you're not here." The surprise on the young woman's face was quickly replaced by a genuine smile. "Of course, sir. It would be great to have someone else reinforcing the movements. The more Arthur practices, the faster he'll progress. And perhaps," Roderick continued, feeling suddenly inspired, "you could help me with another project too." "What project, sir?" Roderick looked at his son, then at the young woman who had brought so much transformation to his family. "I'm thinking of creating a pediatric rehabilitation center within my clinic network. A place where children like Arthur can have access to intensive treatments with professionals who truly believe in their potential. What do you think?" Marina's face lit up with an emotion she couldn't hide. "That would be incredible, Mr. Matthews. So many families need that kind of support. We would need someone who deeply understood the subject to coordinate the project," he continued. "Someone with practical experience, with a differentiated vision of rehabilitation. Marina immediately understood what he was proposing, and a blush spread across her cheeks. "Sir, I don't have the formal qualifications for that. I'm just a nanny with a technical nursing course." "For now," Roderick replied with a decision he had just made. "But that can change. If you want to, of course." Before Marina could respond, Laura appeared at the door, clearly surprised to see her husband still home, talking to the nanny while Arthur watched the scene with childish curiosity. "Good morning," she said, looking from one to the other with an intrigued expression. "What's going on here?" Roderick smiled at his wife with a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. "We're planning the future, dear. A future very different from what I imagined until yesterday." And there, in his son's room with his family gathered and a revolutionary idea dawning in his mind, Roderick knew he had found a new purpose, one that transcended spreadsheets, meetings, and growth targets. A purpose that, ironically, had been there all along, just waiting for him to open his eyes to see it. The news of the sale of a majority stake in the Matthews Health Group caused a small earthquake in the American financial market. Analysts struggled to understand why Roderick Matthews, known for his centralized and ambitious profile, had decided to relinquish operational control of his company just as it reached its peak. Specialized newspapers speculated about hidden financial problems, disputes between partners, or even health issues the entrepreneur might be concealing. The truth, however, was much simpler and infinitely more valuable than any market speculation could suggest. 3 months after Arthur's birthday party, the routine at the Greenwich mansion had completely transformed. Roderick still went to the Fifth Avenue office, but rarely before 9 a.m., and almost never returned after 6 p.m. Travel, once weekly, became an exception. Video conferences replaced many previously considered essential displacements, and meetings that once occupied entire weekends were now condensed into a few hours. The biggest change, however, happened every morning, between 7 a.m. and 8 a.m. in the mansion's garden. That's when Roderick, Arthur, and Marina gathered for their daily exercise session. What began as a timid observation by the father had turned into active participation. Roderick not only learned every movement, every technique developed by Marina, but also began to contribute his own ideas, adapting equipment and creating new games that stimulated his son's motor development. On that sunny May morning, the three were in the garden, celebrating another achievement. Arthur had just completed the small obstacle course without any external support. 6 steps in a row, a turn, 4 more steps, dodging a cone, and finally 3 more steps to the treasure, a small box with dinosaur stickers. "I did it, Dad! I did it!" the boy shouted, jumping in place with Marina's hands supporting him. "I saw it, champ." "Incredible," Roderick replied, with a genuine excitement that would have seemed completely out of character for anyone who knew him only in his corporate environment. Marina observed the scene with a discreet smile. In recent months, she had witnessed a transformation that went far beyond Arthur's physical progress. It was the metamorphosis of an entire family, the father rediscovering his role, the mother reconnecting with the partner she had lost to work, and the son blossoming with renewed attention. "I think someone deserves a super breakfast after that record," Marina suggested, as she helped Arthur balance. "Pancakes with chocolate syrup," the boy immediately exclaimed. I don't know," Roderick teased, pretending to consider. "Does the strongest dinosaur in the garden deserve pancakes with chocolate syrup?" Yes. "I deserve it," Arthur insisted, playing along. "Then let's go." Race to the kitchen. On 3, 1, 2. Before Roderick finished counting, Arthur had already turned and was taking determined, though still unsteady, steps towards the house, with Marina by his side, ready to support him if necessary. Roderick watched the two walk away, feeling a wave of gratitude so intense it almost suffocated him. In less than 6 months, his son had gone from a child almost completely dependent on support to move to a boy who now defied gravity with determination, step by step, day after day. Inside the kitchen, he found Laura already preparing the pancake batter. Their eyes met, and a knowing smile was exchanged. One of those silent moments they had begun to share again after years of merely functional communication. "Our explorer broke another record," Roderick commented, approaching to kiss his wife's cheek. "I saw it from the window," she replied, with a sparkle of pride in her eyes. It's almost time for that surprise visit to school, isn't it? Roderick nodded, feeling the excitement grow. For weeks, they had planned to take Arthur to visit his school without the prior knowledge of teachers and classmates. They wanted to see everyone's reaction when the boy walked in, even if for a short distance, without his usual crutches. While Laura finished breakfast and Marina helped Arthur wash his hands, Roderick received a message on his phone that made him frown. "Any problem?" Laura asked, noticing his expression. "It's from Charles, the CFO. Andrew is making changes to the company's structure that weren't foreseen in the agreement. He wants to accelerate the expansion into the American South and cut some areas he considers less profitable." "And is that bad?" Laura asked, flipping the first pancake. Roderick sighed, putting his phone away. "Not necessarily. Andrew is an excellent administrator, and some of the changes make sense, but I'm concerned about the research and development sector. It's less profitable in the short term, but fundamental for sustainable growth." Laura knew her husband well. Despite having sold most of the shares and handed over operational control, Roderick still cared deeply about the company he had built. It was natural for him to feel some discomfort seeing changes in his creation. "You have a board meeting next week, right? You can present your arguments there." Roderick nodded, forcing himself to put the worry aside. He had promised himself he wouldn't let work issues invade moments with his family, especially mornings, the period Arthur responded best to stimulation, according to Marina. Breakfast proceeded with its usual liveliness, Arthur recounting his imaginary dinosaur adventures, Laura commenting on the beach house renovation project she had recently resumed, Marina discreetly ensuring the boy could eat with as much independence as possible. As he observed the scene, Roderick thought about how much his definition of success had changed. 6 months ago, his big project was the group's expansion into the American South. Now it was the creation of a specialized center inspired by Marina's work with his son. A project that perhaps wouldn't bring the same financial returns as his other initiatives, but would have a much deeper impact on the lives of countless families. "Daddy, shall we show Teacher Anne that I can walk without crutches now?" Arthur asked, interrupting Roderick's thoughts. "Of course, son. In fact, Mommy and I were thinking of making a surprise visit to school. What do you think?" Arthur's little face lit up at the idea. "Today? Can we go today? I want to show Michael and Louisa." "Not today, champ. I have an important meeting this morning." "But how about tomorrow?" Arthur's expression drooped slightly with disappointment, but he soon brightened at the prospect of surprising his friends the next day. "Then let's practice a lot today. I want to walk a lot tomorrow." Marina and Laura exchanged worried glances. "Arthur, remember what we talked about not overdoing it?" Marina said gently. "We need to respect your body's time. Too much effort at once can cause pain and setbacks." "But I want to show everyone," the boy insisted, with the typical stubbornness of his age. "And you will," Roderick assured him. "But Marina is right. We have to follow the plan without skipping steps." "That's how you got here, wasn't it?" Arthur nodded, still a little disgruntled but accepting the logic. One of the qualities that most impressed Roderick about his son was his capacity for understanding. Even at just 4 years old, the boy already showed surprising maturity in dealing with his limitations and the rules imposed for his development. "Now I need to get ready for work," Roderick said, getting up from the table. "But I'll be back for lunch. We have that interview with Dr. Claudia at 2, remember?" Laura and Marina nodded. Dr. Claudia Foster was one of New York City's most respected pediatric physical therapists, specializing in complex cases of motor rehabilitation. Roderick had invited her to see Arthur's progress, and more importantly, to discuss the project he had been developing in recent months, the Integrated Child Rehabilitation Center, which would be built as an extension of his main clinic in New York City. As he drove to the office, Roderick couldn't help but smile, thinking about how much his vision of success had changed. 6 months ago, his big project was the group's expansion into the American South. Now it was the creation of a specialized center inspired by Marina's work with his son. A project that perhaps wouldn't bring the same financial returns as his other initiatives, but would have a much deeper impact on the lives of countless families. The Fifth Avenue office was no longer the same. The president's office, once occupied by Roderick, now belonged to Andrew Miller. Roderick maintained a smaller office, more suited to his new role as a board member and special consultant, a title specifically created to ensure his continued presence in the company without direct operational responsibilities. "Good morning." Marina, his new secretary, the old one having followed Andrew to the presidency, greeted him. "Any news?" "Good morning, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Miller left a report for you to review before the 10 a.m. meeting, and Dr. Claudia confirmed her visit this afternoon at your residence." Roderick thanked her and entered his office, immediately opening the report left by Andrew. As he suspected, it included a restructuring proposal that would significantly affect the research and development department. The arguments were solid from a purely financial standpoint. The return on investment was low in the short term, and resources could be redirected to more immediately profitable areas. As he prepared his counter-arguments for the meeting, Roderick was interrupted by a call. It was Dr. Peter Allison, the neurologist who had been following Arthur since birth. "Roderick, I'm sorry to call like this without warning," the doctor began, with a tone that immediately put Roderick on alert. "I have the results of Arthur's latest tests here, and I'd like to discuss them personally. Do you have time today?" "Of course, Peter. Has something happened?" "I prefer to talk in person. It's nothing to be immediately alarmed about, but we need to evaluate some changes in the results." After scheduling an appointment for later that afternoon, Roderick tried to return to work, but his mind was agitated. What could have appeared in the tests? Had Arthur's progress masked some other problem? Or worse, were the intensive exercises causing some previously unidentified damage? The 10 a.m. meeting was tense. Andrew presented his restructuring proposal with his usual efficiency, supported by impressive charts and optimistic projections. Roderick, in turn, defended the maintenance of the research department, arguing for its long-term strategic importance and the company's reputation in the market. "I understand your points, Roderick," Andrew replied with that smile that didn't reach his eyes, "but you sold control precisely so we could implement a more, let's say, pragmatic management. The market doesn't wait. If we don't move quickly, international competitors will swallow us." The discussion continued for almost an hour, with other board members divided between the two positions. In the end, they reached a compromise. The department would be restructured, not eliminated, with a focus on projects with more predictable returns. It was a partial victory, but Roderick couldn't feel satisfied. His mind kept returning to Dr. Peter's call and what might be happening with Arthur. As soon as the meeting ended, he called Laura. "Did Peter call you?" he asked without preamble. "No." "Why? Has something happened?" Roderick hesitated. He didn't want to alarm his wife unnecessarily, especially when he himself didn't know exactly what was going on. "He wants to talk about Arthur's latest tests. We're scheduled for 5 p.m. at his office. Can you make it?" The silence on the other end of the line revealed Laura's immediate concern. "Of course. Did he say what it is?" "No, just that we need to discuss some changes in the results. But he assured me it's nothing to be immediately alarmed about." "That's not very reassuring," Laura replied, her voice tense. "Should we take Arthur?" "I think it's better not to. Let's first understand what it's about. Marina can stay with him while we're out." After hanging up, Roderick tried to focus on answering emails and analyzing other documents, but his mind kept returning to the possibilities. During lunch at home, he tried to maintain normalcy, not wanting to worry Arthur or Marina. Laura, equally tense, also maintained a facade of tranquility. The interview with Dr. Claudia was a welcome break from the couple's worries. The physical therapist was visibly impressed with Arthur's progress, and especially with the techniques developed by Marina. "It's truly extraordinary," she commented, after observing one of the exercise sessions in the garden. Marina's approach combines elements of various therapeutic methodologies, but in a very intuitive way adapted to Arthur's personality. Roderick observed the nanny, who blushed slightly at the renowned specialist's compliment. "That's how I learned with my brother," Marina explained, with her usual simplicity. "Every child responds differently. The secret is to discover what motivates each of them, and turn therapy into something they want to do, not something they are forced to do." "Exactly," Dr. Claudia agreed enthusiastically. "That's the principle we want to implement at the Integrated Center. Individualized rehabilitation, focused not only on physical aspects, but on the child's holistic development. As the two women discussed techniques and approaches, Roderick realized how much Marina had blossomed in recent months. The shy young woman who had entered his home as a nanny had transformed into a confident professional, capable of discussing on equal terms with one of the greatest authorities in the field. Part of this transformation was due to him, who had insisted that she start physical therapy school, fully paid for by him, and had officially included her in the Integrated Center project, initially as a consultant, with the promise of a permanent position after her graduation. "Marina, have you thought about documenting your methodology?" Dr. Claudia asked. "It would be valuable to have a systematic record of the techniques you've developed." "Actually," Roderick interjected, "we're already working on that. Marina has kept a detailed diary since she started working with Arthur, and we've hired a team to film the sessions and organize the material for possible publication." The idea of publication was recent. It emerged after a conversation with Dr. Peter, who suggested that Marina's work could benefit many other families if properly documented and disseminated. After Dr. Claudia left, Roderick and Laura prepared for the meeting with the neurologist. The anxiety, momentarily forgotten during the discussions about the Integrated Center, returned with full force. "Are you sure you don't want me to come along?" Marina asked as they were leaving. "Thank you, Marina, but it's better if you stay with Arthur," Laura replied. "We don't want to worry him. Depending on what Dr. Peter says, we'll talk later about how to proceed." Dr. Peter Allison's office was in a medical building in the Park Avenue area, not far from the Matthews mansion. During the short drive, Roderick and Laura remained silent, each lost in their own worries. The neurologist received them promptly, with his usual serene expression. Peter had followed Arthur since the initial diagnosis and had always been direct and honest with the family, never overly softening reality or painting unnecessarily pessimistic scenarios. "Thank you for coming so quickly," he said, indicating the chairs in front of his desk. "As you know, I requested a complete battery of tests for Arthur after his last checkup, mainly because his motor progress in recent months has been surprising." Roderick and Laura nodded, tense. The doctor opened a folder with the results. The tests show some significant changes in Arthur's brain activity, particularly in the areas responsible for motor control. "Positive or negative changes?" Roderick asked, apprehensive. Dr. Peter smiled slightly. "Very positive. In fact, we're seeing evidence of accelerated neuroplasticity. His brain is literally recreating connections and alternative pathways to compensate for the damaged areas during childbirth." The relief was so intense that Laura let out a small sob. Roderick squeezed his wife's hand, feeling his own heart slow down. "So his progress is real and sustainable?" Laura asked, still cautious. "Absolutely. In fact, that's why I requested this meeting. Arthur's case is remarkable, even by the most optimistic standards. We rarely see this level of functional recovery in children with the type of injury he had. And, frankly, I'm curious about what has changed in recent months." Roderick and Laura exchanged glances. It was time to reveal the secret that, until then, they had only shared with Dr. Claudia and a few professionals involved in the Integrated Center project. "We hired a new nanny about 8 months ago," Laura began. "Marina has personal experience with motor rehabilitation. Her younger brother was born with cerebral palsy. She developed a series of adapted exercises and activities for Arthur, turning physical therapy into daily games." "Interesting," the doctor commented, taking notes. "And what is the frequency of these games?" "Daily," Roderick replied. "At least 3 sessions a day, usually in the morning, after lunch, and before bed. Each lasting about 20 to 30 minutes, integrated into normal activities. Additionally, she adapted practically all daily routines to stimulate motor independence." Dr. Peter continued to ask detailed questions about Marina's techniques, occasionally consulting the tests and taking more notes. At the end of almost an hour of conversation, he leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. "What you are describing to me is, essentially, an intensified and personalized form of neurodevelopmental therapy, but applied continuously and integrated into routine, rather than the usual weekly or bi-weekly specialist appointments." "Exactly," Laura confirmed. Marina says it's the consistency that makes the difference, not the intensity of each individual session. She is absolutely right, the doctor agreed. The most recent scientific literature points in this direction. The developing brain responds better to frequent and consistent stimuli than to intensive but sporadic interventions. Roderick felt a wave of pride. His intuition about Marina had been correct from the start. This young woman, without formal academic training, had, out of necessity and dedication, developed an approach that specialists with decades of study were only recently beginning to scientifically validate. I would like to meet this Marina and, if possible, observe one of these sessions, Dr. Peter continued. With his current progress and maintaining this approach, I believe we can be even more optimistic about Arthur's future development. Actually, Doctor, Roderick interjected, we are developing a project based precisely on Marina's methodology, an integrated child rehabilitation center, which will offer a similar approach to other children with motor challenges. The neurologist's eyes widened, genuinely interested. That's extraordinary. If you can replicate the results obtained with Arthur, we'll be talking about a significant contribution to pediatric rehabilitation. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, with the doctor making recommendations about adjustments to Arthur's medication, which could be gradually reduced, and about the scientific documentation of the process for eventual publication in specialized journals. As they left the office, Roderick and Laura felt lighter than they had in a long time. The medical confirmation of Arthur's progress and the scientific validation of Marina's approach were the icing on the cake of a transformation that had already brought indescribable joy to the family. We need to do something special for Marina, Laura commented as they walked to the car. She changed our son's life. She changed our lives. Roderick nodded, thoughtful. In recent months, he had done a lot for the young woman. He had offered a substantially higher salary, paid for her college, and guaranteed her a position at the future integrated center. But he knew that for Marina, none of that was as important as Arthur's progress and the chance to help other children. I have an idea, he finally said, as he opened the car door for his wife. Something that goes beyond any financial compensation. On the way back home, Roderick shared his idea with Laura. The plan was ambitious and would require complicated negotiations with Andrew and the board, but he was determined to make it happen. Laura listened attentively, asking pertinent questions and suggesting adjustments. When they finished discussing the details, she smiled with admiration. Sometimes I wonder who has changed more in recent months. Arthur, you or me, she commented. Roderick chuckled, recognizing the truth in those words. Arthur's transformation was the most visible, but it wasn't the only one. He himself had rediscovered priorities he had lost sight of. And Laura, who for years had lived in the shadow of her husband's career, dedicating herself exclusively to Arthur, was now gradually returning to her profession, collaborating on the architectural design of the integrated center and resuming old contacts. Upon arriving home, they found Marina and Arthur in the playroom. The boy was putting together a dinosaur puzzle, concentrating while the nanny watched, intervening only when necessary. How was the appointment? Marina asked as soon as she saw them. Better than we could have hoped, Laura replied, smiling. Dr. Peter was impressed with Arthur's progress. He wants to meet you and observe an exercise session. Marina's face lit up at the news, but her expression soon turned apprehensive. He's a renowned doctor. What if he thinks what I'm doing isn't right? I don't have academic training, only practical experience. It was precisely that practical experience that transformed Arthur's life, Roderick reassured her. Dr. Peter said your approach aligns with the latest research in neuroplasticity and motor rehabilitation. He's eager to meet you. The relief on Marina's face was palpable. Since Roderick discovered her secret, she had lived with a silent fear that some specialist would question her methods or, worse, suggest they could be harmful in the long term. Actually, Roderick continued, we have a proposal for you, Marina. Something we'd like to discuss after Arthur goes to sleep. The young woman nodded, curious, but soon turned her attention back to Arthur, who was excitedly calling to show off the nearly completed puzzle. That night, after Arthur fell asleep, the three gathered in Roderick's office. Marina seemed nervous, sitting on the edge of the armchair, her hands restless in her lap. Laura served tea for everyone, trying to create a more relaxed atmosphere. "Marina," Roderick began, "in recent months, you have transformed our son's life in ways that even the most optimistic specialists believed impossible. What you did, what you continue to do, goes beyond any professional obligation." The young woman blushed at the compliment, but kept her gaze firm. "It's my job, Mr. Matthews, and honestly, it's a privilege to be able to help Arthur. He's an incredible child." "It's more than work," Laura interjected with emotion in her voice. "You brought hope to our family. You gave Arthur back the chance of a full childhood, with all the possibilities we feared he would never have." Roderick nodded, feeling his own emotion well up. He cleared his throat before continuing. "As you know, we are finalizing the Integrated Center project. Construction will begin next month, and operations are expected to start in approximately 1 year. Yes, Sir, Dr. Claudia commented today that the architectural plans are almost ready." "Exactly. And from the beginning, we planned for you to have an important role at the center, after completing your physical therapy degree." Marina nodded, her eyes shining at the prospect. It was a dream she never imagined possible a few months ago, not only to study, but to already have a guaranteed place in a reference center, working with the renowned Dr. Claudia. "However," Roderick continued, "Laura and I have been talking, and we believe your role should be much larger than initially planned." The young woman frowned, confused. "What do you mean, sir?" Roderick looked at Laura, who nodded encouragingly, before turning back to Marina. "We want you to be the technical director of the Integrated Center." Marina's eyes widened, jaw dropped. But that's impossible. I haven't even started college yet. A position like that requires advanced academic training, proven experience, recognition in the field. All that will come with time," Roderick replied calmly. "While you are studying, Dr. Claudia will officially be the technical and medical director, with you as a special assistant. When you graduate, you will take over the position with her as a consultant." "But why?" Marina asked, genuinely perplexed. "There are much more qualified professionals." "Qualified on paper, perhaps," Laura interjected, "but no one understands better than you how to transform rehabilitation into something integrated into daily life. No one has your sensitivity to adapt techniques to the specific needs of each child. And most importantly," Roderick added, "no one has your vision. The center won't just be another rehabilitation clinic. It will be a place where children like Arthur and families like ours will find hope and concrete ways to overcome limitations." Marina was visibly emotional. Her tear-filled eyes reflected a mixture of gratitude, surprise, and a touch of fear at the responsibility being offered to her. "That's a lot of trust you're placing in me," she said, her voice trembling. "Well-deserved trust," Laura replied, gently squeezing the young woman's hand. "You gave our son back to us. There's no way to adequately repay something like that." Roderick observed the scene, feeling a deep certainty that he was making the right decision. This young woman of humble origins, without diplomas or titles, had achieved what renowned specialists could not just through technical knowledge, but through something much rarer and more valuable, the perfect combination of empathy, intuition, and tireless dedication. "So, Marina," he continued, "what do you say? Do you accept the challenge?" Marina took a deep breath, discreetly wiping away a tear that had escaped. "I accept, Mr. Matthews, and I promise I will do my utmost to honor this trust." At that moment, the three shared a smile of complicity and hope. It was the beginning of a new phase, not only for Marina, but for all the children who would benefit from her revolutionary approach. What none of them could imagine was that very soon this decision would be tested in ways they had not foreseen. The path ahead held challenges that would require much more than goodwill and dedication. It would require courage to defend a vision that many would consider too radical for the conservative American medical community. The changes in Marina's life were dizzying in the months that followed. From nanny to university student, from caregiver to future technical director of an innovative rehabilitation center, her reality transformed at a pace she could barely keep up with. 3 nights a week after Arthur fell asleep, she traveled across New York City to attend classes at New York University, NYU, where she was in her first semester of physical therapy, on a full scholarship provided by Roderick. During the day, in addition to caring for Arthur, who continued to progress consistently, she now actively participated in the development of the integrated center, contributing ideas for the physical structure, service protocols, and work methodologies. Her desk in the Matthews house bedroom overflowed with books, handouts, notes, and sketches, a testament to her commitment to her new responsibility. One August afternoon, while accompanying Laura and Arthur in a conventional physical therapy session, Marina received a call from Roderick that would once again change the course of events. "Marina, I need you to come to my office as soon as possible. There's been a change of plans for the center project." The apprehension in his voice was evident even over the phone. "Has something happened, Mr. Matthews?" "I prefer to explain in person. Can you come today?" After consulting Laura, who promptly offered to stay with Arthur, Marina took a taxi to Roderick's Fifth Avenue office. During the ride, her mind raced with possibilities, perhaps problems with the construction permit, delays in the schedule, budgetary issues. Upon arriving at the office, she found not only Roderick, but also Dr. Claudia and a man she didn't know, with an executive appearance and austere expression. "Marina, thank you for coming so quickly," Roderick said, rising to greet her. "You already know Dr. Claudia. This is Andrew Miller, current CEO of the Matthews Health Group." Andrew extended his hand politely, but his evaluating gaze instantly made Marina uncomfortable. "So this is the famous Marina," he commented, with a tone that mixed curiosity and skepticism. "Roderick talks a lot about you and your miraculous work with his son." The use of the word miraculous, with that slightly ironic intonation, did not go unnoticed by anyone present. Marina felt her cheeks flush, but maintained the professional demeanor she had been developing in recent weeks. "There's nothing miraculous, Mr. Miller, just dedication, consistency, and an individualized approach that respects each child's pace and particularities." Andrew smiled, seemingly satisfied with the articulate response. "Undoubtedly. However, we are talking about investing millions in a center based on methods that, as far as I know, lack rigorous scientific validation." "Actually," Dr. Claudia interjected, "the basic principles of Marina's approach are solidly grounded in literature on neuroplasticity and motor development. The difference lies in the application and intensity of the program." Andrew made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "I understand your enthusiasm, but as CEO I need to consider the commercial viability and the group's reputation. A rehabilitation center that promises extraordinary results based on the methods of forgive me, Marina, of a nanny without complete academic training represents a considerable risk." Roderick, who had been observing the interaction in silence until then, finally intervened. "Andrew, we've already discussed this. The board approved the project. The resources are already allocated. The board approved a conventional pediatric rehabilitation center with proven methods and a team of renowned professionals," Andrew retorted. "What I am questioning is the central role you want to give Marina and her alternative methodology." Marina felt as if the ground disappeared beneath her feet. So that was it. Her role in the project was being questioned. She looked at Roderick, seeking some guidance. "Marina," he said gently, "why don't you explain to Andrew in your own words the approach you've developed?" The young woman took a deep breath, organizing her thoughts. In recent weeks, she had studied intensely to scientifically underpin what she had until then done, by intuition and practical experience. Now that knowledge would be put to the test. "Mr. Miller, my approach does not replace conventional therapies. It complements and intensifies them. The basic principle is simple. Transform therapeutic exercises into enjoyable daily activities integrated into the child's routine." As she explained her methodology in detail, Marina noticed that Andrew's expression fluctuated between genuine interest and persistent skepticism. After finishing her explanation, the executive leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "Impressive," he commented finally. "You articulate your ideas well, Marina. But understand my position. We're talking about an investment of over $15 million in infrastructure, equipment, and personnel. The return on that investment depends on the center's credibility with the medical community and with high-income families who can afford the treatments." "And what exactly is your proposal?" Roderick asked, his voice tense. Andrew smiled as if satisfied to finally reach the central point of the discussion. My proposal is simple. We will keep the integrated center, but as a conventional extension of our network. Dr. Claudia will be the technical and medical director, supported by a team of renowned specialists. Marina can participate as an assistant, if Dr. Claudia so wishes, but only after completing her training. The silence that followed was dense, almost palpable. For Marina, it was as if a dream was being snatched from her hands just as it began to materialize. That's not acceptable, Roderick said finally. The center's differential would be precisely Marina's innovative approach. Turning it into just another conventional clinic defeats the entire purpose of the project. Andrew shrugged. Then perhaps we need to rethink the project as a whole. As CEO, I cannot approve such a significant investment in something I consider high risk for the group's reputation. It was a clear impasse. Roderick, even as a board member and significant shareholder, no longer had the final decision-making power he once had. Andrew, as CEO, could effectively block or substantially modify the project. If I may, Marina interjected, surprising everyone, I have a suggestion. The three looked at her, curious. And what would that be? Andrew asked with slight condescension. A controlled test, she replied with a confidence she didn't know she possessed. We select a group of 10 children with conditions similar to Arthur's. Half receive conventional treatment at the group's current clinics with Dr. Claudia's team. The other half receives treatment with my methodology, under appropriate medical supervision, of course. After 6 months, we compare the results. The proposal caught everyone by surprise. Roderick smiled, proud of Marina's initiative. Dr. Claudia nodded, visibly approving the idea. Even Andrew seemed genuinely intrigued. A pilot study, he commented thoughtfully. It wouldn't be scientifically conclusive with such a small sample, but it would serve as a proof of concept. Exactly, Marina confirmed. If the results are promising, we proceed with the original plan. If not, we reevaluate the approach. It's a fair compromise based on data, not personal opinions. Andrew studied the young woman with a new look. He no longer saw her just as the nanny who had won the Matthews trust, but as someone with analytical capacity and a willingness to face challenges head-on. Interesting, he said finally. Very interesting. We'll need to establish clear evaluation parameters, inclusion criteria, monitoring methodology. Dr. Claudia and I were already working on that. As part of the scientific documentation of the methodology, Roderick informed him. We can adapt it for a formal comparative study. The meeting continued for another hour, with the four discussing details of the proposed pilot study. In the end, they reached an agreement. The Integrated Center project would be temporarily suspended, replaced by a reduced version that would serve as a field for the comparative study. The construction of the full version would depend on the results obtained. When Andrew and Dr. Claudia left, Roderick and Marina remained in the office, processing what had happened. I'm sorry about this, Roderick said, visibly frustrated. I should have anticipated Andrew's resistance. He's brilliant in business, but extremely conservative when it comes to innovations that cannot be immediately translated into profits. Marina shook her head. You don't need to apologize, Mr. Matthews. In a way, Mr. Miller is right to be cautious. We are proposing something truly different, based on methods that still lack rigorous scientific validation. But it worked with Arthur. Roderick protested. The results are there, visible for anyone to see. Yes, but an isolated case doesn't make science, Marina replied, with the maturity she had been developing through her studies. The pilot study is a good idea. If my approach really works as I believe, the results will speak for themselves. Roderick smiled, admiring the young woman's attitude. Where many would see a frustrating obstacle, she saw an opportunity for validation. You continue to surprise me, Marina. Most people would have given up at the first hurdle. She smiled simply. I grew up watching my brother overcome much bigger obstacles. Mr. Matthews, that taught me that giving up is never an option when we truly believe in what we're doing. The next morning, upon arriving at the Matthews mansion, Marina found Arthur particularly agitated. The boy was running back and forth across the room, still with unsteady steps, but noticeably more confident than weeks ago. Marina, "Guess what I managed to do today?" he exclaimed as soon as he saw her. "What, little explorer?" she asked, smiling. "I climbed the stairs by myself, holding only the handrail." Marina's eyes widened, genuinely surprised. Climbing stairs was one of Arthur's biggest challenges, requiring coordination, strength and balance that they had been working on for months, but still with limited results. "It's true," Laura confirmed, entering the room. "I was in the bedroom when I heard footsteps on the stairs. I almost had a nervous breakdown, thinking he was alone and might fall. But when I reached the top of the stairs, he was already arriving, holding only lightly to the handrail." The pride in Laura's voice was palpable. Marina felt her eyes well up. Every one of Arthur's achievements was also a personal victory, a confirmation that her work, her dedication, and her belief in the boy's abilities were on the right track. "That deserves a special celebration," she said, kneeling to hug the boy. "How about we expand our obstacle course in the garden today? We can add a mini staircase." Arthur enthusiastically agreed, already rattling off ideas on how to turn the new skill into an explorer adventure. As the boy spoke, Marina exchanged meaningful glances with Laura. Both knew how much that seemingly simple achievement represented in terms of independence and quality of life. During breakfast, Laura told Marina about the conversation she had had with Roderick the night before. After the meeting with Andrew, he's frustrated, but he believes the pilot study is the right path. In fact, he thinks it might even be better in the long run, as it will give scientific legitimacy to your approach. Marina nodded, thoughtful. The idea of the pilot study made her simultaneously anxious and excited. It was an opportunity to prove the value of her methodology, but it also brought enormous responsibility, not only to Roderick and the Matthews family, who had invested so much in her, but especially to the children who would participate in the study. "We'll need to select participants carefully," she commented. "Children with similar conditions, but each with their own particularities, and we'll need to work very closely with the families. My approach only works when there's constant family involvement." "Dr. Claudia is already working on that," Laura informed her. "She has a list of potential patients from the group's clinics." The following weeks were filled with intense preparation. Marina divided her time between caring for Arthur, attending college classes, and meetings with the team conducting the pilot study. Under Dr. Claudia's guidance, she meticulously documented every aspect of her methodology, transforming intuitive knowledge into structured protocols that could be replicated and evaluated. In October, the study finally began. 10 children aged 3 to 6, all with motor limitations similar to Arthur's initial condition, were divided into 2 groups. The control group would receive conventional treatment offered by the group's clinics: physical therapy twice a week, occupational therapy, regular medical follow-up. The experimental group would follow the Marina methodology, as some were already beginning to call it, daily exercises integrated into routine, intensive family involvement, a playful and personalized approach. The responsibility was immense, and Marina felt its weight at every follow-up meeting, every visit to the families in the experimental group, every report she had to fill out. But there was also a growing sense of purpose, of doing exactly what she was born to do. "How are you feeling?" Roderick asked after one of those follow-up meetings 2 months into the study. "Honestly? Exhausted and scared," she replied, with the frankness that characterized her relationship with the entrepreneur. "But also more alive than I've ever felt." Roderick smiled, understanding. "You know you can still back out, don't you? No one would blame you for wanting to focus only on your studies and Arthur, leaving the study in the hands of the medical team." Marina shook her head, determined. "No way. These children, these families, they need this as much as my brother and I did. I can't abandon them now." Her words touched Roderick deeply. This young woman, who had entered his house as a simple nanny, revealed a depth of character and a sense of mission that he had rarely found even among the most experienced professionals he had ever hired. "You are truly extraordinary, Marina. I knew it from the first moment I saw you working with Arthur, but you continue to surprise me." She blushed at the compliment, shyly looking away. "I just do what I believe is right, Mr. Matthews." As the study progressed, the first signs of differentiation between the groups began to appear. The children in the Marina methodology group showed faster and more consistent progress in specific areas: balance, coordination, independence in daily activities. The control group also progressed, but at a slower pace and with less expressive results in terms of practical functionality. The difference, however, was not just in the numbers or technical evaluations. It was in the sparkle in the eyes of the children who, like Arthur, discovered new possibilities every day. It was in the emotional accounts of parents who saw their children performing tasks that once seemed impossible. It was in the transformation of family dynamics, when the focus shifted from limitation to potential. In the 4th month of the study, Andrew Miller requested an extraordinary meeting with the team. Everyone feared it was to question the project's continuity, perhaps due to budgetary issues or shareholder pressures. To everyone's surprise, the CEO arrived accompanied not only by his usual assistant, but also by a middle-aged woman and a teenager in a wheelchair. "This is my sister, Beatrice, and my nephew Philip," he introduced, with a formality that could not hide the underlying emotion. "Philip has cerebral palsy, diagnosed at 2 years old. He has been following the reports about the pilot study with interest." The revelation caught everyone by surprise. Andrew had never mentioned having a nephew with special needs, and certainly had never shown personal interest in the field of child rehabilitation. "Philip is in his first year of medical school at Columbia University Medical Center," Andrew continued, with visible pride. "And he has just been accepted into a scientific initiation program focused precisely on neuroplasticity and motor rehabilitation." The young man smiled, visibly embarrassed by the attention. "Actually," Philip said, in a clear and articulate voice, "I was fascinated when my uncle told me about this study. Marina's approach echoes much of what I experienced in my own rehabilitation. My mother always turned my exercises into games, integrated treatment into daily routine. Many of the techniques described in the study protocol are similar to those we used intuitively." Marina looked at the young man with renewed interest. There was something familiar in his story, something that resonated deeply with her own experience with her brother. "I would love to hear more about your journey," she said, genuinely interested. "Perhaps we can compare notes on what worked for you and what we're seeing with the children in the study." Philip nodded enthusiastically, and Andrew cleared his throat, resuming the floor. "Actually, I didn't come here just to make family introductions. I have a proposal to expand the study." Andrew's proposal surprised everyone. Not only to continue the pilot study for another 6 months, but to expand it to include 20 additional children. In addition, he suggested creating a training program for parents and caregivers, teaching the basic principles of the Marina methodology so they could apply them at home, complementing conventional therapies. "And what about the integrated center?" Roderick asked, still cautious. "If the results continue on their current trajectory, we will resume the original project in 6 months, Andrew replied. "With some adaptations, of course. I would like Philip to participate as a consultant. His perspective as someone who experienced rehabilitation would be invaluable. And we also envision a more robust research component, possibly in partnership with the medical school." The meeting proceeded with animated discussions about the possibilities that were opening up. For Marina, it was as if a new horizon was unfolding. Not only the validation of her work, but the opportunity to expand it to benefit many more children than she had ever imagined. At the end of the day, when everyone had left, Roderick called Marina for a private conversation in his office. "Did you see what happened today?" he asked with an enigmatic smile. "Yes, Mr. Miller's proposal is fantastic. I never imagined he would support the project so enthusiastically." "It's not just that," Roderick replied, leaning back in his chair. "Do you realize you turned a fierce skeptic into a passionate advocate? Andrew isn't known for changing his mind easily. But you, your work, your dedication, the results you're getting, achieved something many would consider impossible." Marina blushed at the compliment, but there was a question she couldn't get out of her mind. Why did he never mention his nephew before? It would have been so much easier if we had known he had this personal connection to the topic. Roderick shrugged. "Andrew has always kept his personal life separate from business. It's part of what makes him so efficient as CEO. But I think seeing him today with his nephew revealed a completely new dimension of who he really is." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Laura, accompanied by Arthur, who ran into the office. Yes, ran, albeit with slightly clumsy steps, to show his father the new stuffed dinosaur he had received during a trip to the mall. "Look, Daddy, it's a velociraptor. Marina said they were the fastest of all." Roderick picked up his son, pretending to be scared of the fierce stuffed predator. "Careful. He looks very dangerous." Arthur giggled, delighted with the game. His vocabulary had expanded considerably in recent months, as had his motor coordination and confidence. He was a completely different child from the withdrawn and dependent boy Marina had met upon arriving at that house. "Teacher Anne called today," Laura commented, as Arthur showed his father the details of his new toy. "She said Arthur is ready to move to the regular class next school year. He will need some specific support, but academically he is at the same level as the other children, and socially he has adapted very well." The news was another confirmation of the boy's extraordinary progress. The special school he attended 3 times a week was suggesting his integration into regular education, something that just a year ago seemed a distant dream. "That's wonderful," Marina exclaimed, genuinely happy. "He's going to rock his new school." The following months were filled with intense activity. The expanded study progressed, with increasingly promising results. Marina divided her time between college, where she excelled as one of the best students in her course, visits to the families participating in the study, and caring for Arthur, who, though increasingly independent, still benefited enormously from her daily adapted exercise sessions. One May afternoon, almost a year after Roderick's initial discovery, the family gathered in the garden for a small celebration. Arthur had turned 5, and besides the traditional chocolate cake, there was another reason to celebrate. For the first time, the boy would participate in a school race. An adapted competition, of course, but still a significant milestone in his journey. "I'm nervous, Marina," he confessed as they practiced in the garden. "What if I fall in front of everyone?" The young woman crouched down, getting to the boy's eye level. "Remember what we always say, little explorer? It doesn't matter how many times we fall. What matters is how many times we get up and keep trying." Arthur nodded, still a little insecure but determined. "One step at a time. No rush," he recited, repeating the mantra Marina had established since the beginning of the exercises. "Exactly. And it doesn't matter if you finish first or last. The important thing is that you'll be there running with your friends. That's already a huge victory." On the other side of the garden, Roderick and Laura watched the interaction with emotional smiles. Their son's journey in recent months had been a living testament to the power of dedication, faith in possibilities, and above all, the impact one person can have on another's life when acting driven by a purpose greater than oneself. "You know what I thought the other day?" Laura commented, resting her head on her husband's shoulder. "If you hadn't come home early that day, if you hadn't seen Marina and Arthur in the garden—" "I don't even want to imagine," Roderick replied, embracing her. "We would have lost so much. Not just Arthur's progress, but everything that came after. The reconnection of our family, the center project, Marina's transformation." Laura nodded. "Thoughtful. It's incredible how small changes in direction can completely alter the destiny of so many people." In the middle of the garden, Arthur and Marina continued practicing for the race. The boy could now run several yards without losing his balance, something unthinkable just a few months ago. His movements still lacked the natural fluidity of other children, but they were efficient and, most importantly, performed with a confidence that radiated from his concentrated face. "Look," he shouted to his parents, "I'm running like a real velociraptor." Roderick and Laura applauded, with that pride only parents know, the kind of joy that makes the heart almost burst in the chest. Marina observed the scene with that peculiar mix of pride and nostalgia that educators feel when they see their students growing and becoming increasingly independent. "He won't need you anymore soon, you know," Laura commented, approaching silently. "At least not in the way he needed before." Marina nodded with a serene smile. "And that's exactly how it should be. Our job is to make them independent, not dependent on us. But you will always have a place in our family," Laura continued, gently squeezing the young woman's arm. "What you did for Arthur, for us, there's no way to adequately repay it." "You have already repaid much more than you imagine," Marina replied sincerely. "You gave me the chance to study, to develop meaningful work, to be part of something much bigger than myself. As they talked, Arthur ran to them, his steps increasingly sure and fluid. "Marina! Mommy, come see the new trick Philip taught me." The two followed the boy to the garden, where Philip was showing a small group how to use a wheelchair to perform impressive maneuvers. The young medical student had become a frequent visitor to the Matthews mansion, not only as a consultant for the Center project, but as an inspiring role model for Arthur, living proof that physical limitations do not define a person's potential for achievement. "One day, I'll do that too," Arthur declared, admiring Philip's skills. "I'm sure you will, champ," Roderick replied, who had just joined them. "But one thing at a time, remember?" "Yes, Daddy, one step at a time, no rush," the boy recited, repeating the mantra Marina had taught him, and which, without anyone planning it, had become a kind of life philosophy for the entire family. Observing the scene, Arthur trying to imitate Philip's maneuvers, Laura and Roderick encouraging with applause, Mrs. Cecilia bringing refreshments, Andrew chatting animatedly with other parents about the future integrated center. Marina felt a wave of gratitude so intense, it almost suffocated her. Her life had completely changed in the space of a year. From a young woman with limited future prospects, she had transformed into the creator of an innovative methodology, future technical director of a reference center, a rising university student. More than that, she had found her true purpose, that rare kind of clarity that some seek all their lives and never find. All because one day Roderick Matthews came home early and witnessed what she was doing with his son. A coincidence? A twist of fate? A divine intervention? Marina couldn't say. Perhaps it was simply the natural result of the encounter between people driven by purposes greater than themselves. A father's love for his son. A young woman's dedication, inspired by her own family history. The courage to challenge limits that seemed insurmountable. "What are you thinking about?" Roderick asked, approaching as Arthur continued his attempts to imitate Philip. Marina smiled, watching the boy who had transformed her life as much as she had transformed his. "I'm thinking about how incredible the power of a single step is. One step can change everything." Roderick nodded, perfectly understanding the meaning of those words. A literal step in Arthur's case, who now ran and played like any child his age. A metaphorical step for all of them. Those small choices that, combined, created entirely new and unexpected paths. "One step at a time," he repeated, smiling. "No rush," Marina completed, as they watched Arthur take another step on his journey of discovery. Dear listeners, we hope this story has touched your hearts and shown the transformative power that small daily acts can have in our lives. The journey of Roderick, Arthur, and Marina reminds us that often it is the subtle changes in direction that completely alter our destinies. If you were moved by this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and share with anyone else who might be inspired by this message of hope and overcoming. Tell us in the comments which character touched your heart the most. Have you ever experienced a similar situation? Every day we bring stories that explore the richness and complexity of human relationships. Don't miss our next content. Each story is a new opportunity to reflect, be moved, and who knows, see your own life from a new perspective. We look forward to seeing you in the comments. From which city in our immense United States are you watching us?